From humble beginnings to the pinnacle of success, one man's journey proves that with determination, anything is possible. This is Catch as Catch Can with George Tinsley Sr., inspiring conversations of triumph over adversity. Here's George.
Hello, Jania. It is great to see you today, and welcome. We're glad to have you on the show, and we appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Thank you, George. It's always good to spend time with you.
Well, I appreciate those kind words. To the audience, I want to introduce Jania Bailey, Chief Executive Officer of FranNet, and one of the most respected voices in the franchise consultant industry, with over 30 years of experience in the banking and franchising industry. As a distinguished executive leader, she has transformed FranNet into a thriving franchise model, established key national relationships, and served on the International Franchise Association's executive board, cementing her status as a role model and innovator in the franchise world. Jania, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, George. It's great to be here, and that was too kind.
Well, I tell you, I want to make sure I got it right. We are great friends. We've known each other for years, and been really looking forward to having you on our podcast amongst all these other guys that we've had in the on the through the past shows. So why don't we start off by just telling the audience a little bit about your background and how you got involved.
Well, my background, I'm from Paducah, Kentucky, and that's where I got started in the banking industry. And I spent over 10 years with a local bank there before being recruited to come to Louisville, Kentucky to work for a bigger bank, which was Citizens Fidelity at the time, that later was part of a much larger organization, PNC. So total in banking was almost 20 years, little over 19 years actually. So while in banking, my role was to be a small business lender. So I worked with small businesses as well as some middle market size companies. But I tell people that just paved the way for me to get into franchising. I actually got burned out in banking, just said enough. And I went out and did my own thing for a couple of years. I did public speaking and some consulting with companies that knew me well. And I did everything from customer service to how to read a financial statement. While doing that, one of the clients I developed was a regional owner of Fantastic Sam's in Louisville. He actually owned about 23, 24 salons at the time, as well as had a warehouse. And then he had this regional side that he had signed, to try to grow the region. The time I joined him, we had 3 states. It later became 5 states. So I ran a 5-state region for Fantastic Sam's on the local or the regional level for about 7, 8 years. Then I went to work for corporate Fantastic Sam's. And corporate Fantastic Sam's is where I was. I was in Texas doing a turnaround on a troubled region when, like a lot of companies that are involved with private equity, there was a kind of a time where they started rearranging the chairs on the ship, and the president that had hired me was one of the people that got axed. And I knew, as in corporate America, that a lot of times the next in command and that next level of people are the ones to go for a new president to set up his own shop. Threw my name in the hat at FranNet through some friends that called and said, they found out FranNet had gone through some changes and they were looking for a president. I got the job, George. 8 years ago.
18 years ago, you say? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's outstanding. That's a wonderful background, building from the banking business and then getting into the corporate structure there and starting getting this off the ground. So, what were some of the key challenges that we ran into with FranNet, especially in going to the franchise model?
Well, when I was brought on, there had just been a change in ownership. So the founder had run the company for 19 years, and a group of very successful office owners went together to buy out Howie. He was ready to sell. So that was the first hurdle. They'd been run by the founder all those years. And here's this woman that walks in that's never been in the broker industry. And what does she know about it? And, just I had a lot of that to overcome, first of all. And then as we were trying to convert them, and we did convert them from what was called a mutual benefit company to the franchise. And for those that don't know, a mutual benefit company basically means it was run by volunteers on different levels. There was a inventory committee that was all volunteers. There was a marketing committee that was all volunteers. Not
Well,
only were they volunteers, they really had the responsibility of these things. And we came in and said, we're going to hire professionals and let you do what you need to be doing, which is running your franchise business, not worrying about the corporate level stuff. It was a big change. We were told if we got over 50% to convert, it would have been a home run. And George, we had over 90% convert.
wow.
So it's been quite the ride from that point. We still have several legacy franchisees on board with us.
Right. So you were able to provide the resources within FranNet that really helped those franchisees become more lucrative from the standpoint of operating resources and so forth, marketing and
Exactly.
forth. Yeah.
When I took this job, there were 4.5 positions at the corporate level. Today we have 12. And, where they had a half a person allocated to marketing, we've got a marketing team of 2. We've got an accounting team of 3 where they had 1 bookkeeper back in the day. So just a lot of basics that had to be put in place. And I used to say every time I turned over a rock, there was a new pile of snakes I had to deal with because it'd been the same for 19 years. So there was a lot of updating and cleanup that had to be done.
Mhm. So what strategies in particular did you as a leader implement that helped make all this happen and take it to the next level?
Well, the first was communicate. I over communicate because I think that's what is necessary in the franchise world. So little things like we implemented a weekly update that we still do to this day. We implemented regular calls with the group. Now, during COVID, they became weekly calls. Now we're back to every other week because no need in just having a meeting. But I believe in keeping them informed every step of the way. And have been a franchisee, but, as a franchisor, we always say we need to tell you and tell you and tell you again. And about the time I'm sick of telling you, you get it. Because those franchisees are so busy, my little emails are not top priority. So we need to be sure we don't let anyone go uninformed of changes being made or just the business atmosphere at the time. So the communication, I would say, was a major key.
Mhm. I think back to what you just said when I worked for KFC Corporation as a corporate leader in working with franchisees. Those franchisees were always looking to soak up any and everything that they could when they had a
Yep,
chance to spend time with the franchisor, if you
yep,
will, and of course. Some of the franchisees themselves, the owners that is, sometimes didn't want a whole lot. They just wanted to be able to pick and choose, cherry pick and so
right.
forth. So, but the ones that were really successful, especially you mentioned the legacy franchisees that have
Mhm.
been with you, I'm sure that they really just soaked up and implemented everything that you were putting out there for them. So, given where things have gone here lately, what have you noticed that just jumps out to you in the franchising
Wow.
uh, business?
It has taken, big changes since COVID
Mhm.
in every type of business, but in the sales, the franchise development side especially, um, for example, we used to always meet with all of our clients in person. Now we utilize Zoom or Google Meet or any of the others. 99% of the business now is done virtually. So that's a big change on our side, and I see that happening more and more. Franchisors, I see them still doing some virtual discovery days instead of bringing everybody in. So that's one. But on the development side, Howie Bassick was one of, if not the first broker to set that type of business up. And for those that don't know what a franchise broker is, we don't sell franchises. We match people with franchises that fit their goal, their budgets, their skill set. So it's more of a Match.com or eHarmony of franchising, where we go out and find the best matches and put them together. But when I took this job 18 years ago, there were estimated to be 400 brokers in the industry. Now it's estimated to be 4,000.
Wow.
And the scary thing is the number of people that buy franchises in any given year has not increased. So what you've got is a lot more people out there trying to work with and reach these few. I had been a big supporter of the IFA's efforts with the regulators for broker registration and broker regulation up to some points, because I do believe there's a lot of people in this industry segment of the industry that don't always have the client's best interest at heart, and that could hurt the whole industry.
Mhm.
So we need to really watch that. Another layer is franchise development companies, which aren't brokers. They work directly for the franchisor and act as their outsourced franchise development team. That's something that's relatively new. There was one or two of those around again 18 years ago, and now there's a multitude of them. So a lot of changes in growth, and where the consumer sets, they don't know any difference because they probably didn't know there was any one of us to start with.
Right.
So
Right.
just a lot of changes in there,
Yeah.
George.
Jenny, you mentioned IFA. Can you tell us a little bit more about IFA to the audience out here that may not be familiar with IFA?
Sure. It's the International Franchise Association. And I look at activity in the IFA as necessary to any franchisor or vendor who's serious about staying in this segment of, the market. Because the IFA is a huge advocate for franchising in Washington and the different state levels. And they've helped us overcome some threats that could have been very detrimental to the industry as a whole. So I'm a big supporter, highly involved in IFA. It's a place for education, it's a place for support, and it's a place to network with other people who are exactly where you probably are right now.
Mhm. So getting as a person getting into franchising, would you recommend that they initially join IFA or that some point in the early stages?
As soon as possible. There are a lot of conferences that are geared just for the startups. There's an emerging franchise conference. There's a conference called Springboard, which is outside the IFA, but still geared towards emerging brands. The reason that's so important, what you will hear at those conferences, you're going to hear from people who started up franchises, and they're going to talk about lessons learned and the mistakes they made. And if you can learn from other people's mistakes, you're going to be ahead of the game. So the more you can listen to and hear from these people that have weathered the storms, the better chance your company's going to
Yeah.
have.
When I worked for KFC, once again, just reflecting back to the corporate side, where I was a district manager of with franchise group in the southeast part of the United States. One of the first things that I saw that the more meetings that I could arrange, and in particular, we had just had a minority franchising program kick off, so I helped them start the Minority Franchise Association, which when these franchisees came together, minority or otherwise, they were just so hungry to learn
Mhm.
what other people were doing and can kind of
Right.
compare what they're doing and walk away with good tips. So, in an international franchise association takes it to a whole new level. So,
Exactly.
thank you for giving some insight there. Tell me about the Bonnie LeVine Award.
Well, the Bonnie LeVine Award is a recognition that's given annually to a woman that has been nominated for their work in the industry. Um, I was very humbled and just overcome to have the honor of being given the Bonnie LeVine Award, because the history is Bonnie was quite the leader in the industry, and her whole mission was helping other women, kind of lifting them up and being a resource. Because quite frankly, there haven't been, or back in Bonnie's day especially, there weren't that many women in the industry. Now, there's quite a few of us today, but that hasn't always been the case. So Bonnie made a real point of reaching out to other women and helping them rise in the industry. So again, I was very humbled to be given the award.
Well, quite deserving, I'm sure, and having had an opportunity to work with you in Atlanta back a few years ago and
Yeah.
working with, some of the professional athletes as they were looking to get in franchising, I remember how you connected with the guys and families that were there that were really looking at it and how they, really listened to everything that was coming from you as far as the resources to help them make decisions. So I'm sure that yeah, it was quite deserving award there.
Thank
How's
you.
your experience with the IFA executive board influenced your leadership at FranNet?
Um, Being on a board that large is a learning opportunity because it's such a large board. And I've served on local boards, charities and things like that, and of course was very active in the banking. I served on some committees and board type arrangements. It's a whole different ball game because you're sitting there next to somebody who's high level at McDonald's or KFC, or I mean you're dealing with some of the real major players in the franchise industry, and hearing their viewpoints and their thoughts on different things and how it's affecting the industry, really gave me a different perspective because in the scheme of things, FranNet's a very small piece of the overall franchise, world. So it was good for me to hear that and see that, and it gave me a real insight into how hard the IFA does work for us.
Thanks for that insight. When you look at it from the standpoint of technology playing a role in franchising, how's that changed things from your perspective?
Uh, Fast and furious.
Fast and Furious.
Um, yeah, when I took the job, FranNet was just launching their first website. They had not felt the need for a website, and now we can't imagine functioning without a website and social media and all the presence you have to have. I think the hardest thing, George, is being sure we stay up to date and know what's going on and what opportunities, for us to streamline our work or do better. Um, Technology right now is just it's growing like wildfire. So we've hired an outside firm to actually help us with some of this because unless you're an IT guru, you'll get left behind.
Yeah. Certainly from a franchisee standpoint, the technology that the franchisor has, that's standard operating and
Right.
if you're able to tap into those resources and be able to analyze your business on a daily and sometimes hourly basis, that certainly, really helps out with, from a franchisee standpoint. But like you said, that as a more mature franchisee, I'll say, it's a little tougher sometimes to adapt. But these youngsters that are running our
Yeah.
operations, they do a great job of being able to, if they use it as a tool, constructive tool, to help them get things in line and make bonus, if you will. So yeah. So What do you consider the biggest challenges facing the franchise industry today?
I think we need to continue educating the general population as well as our legislatures, the people that we've elected, about why franchising is needed and why franchising is so important to the overall economy. You know, George, as having had influence on hundreds of people's lives through the year, franchising gives a lot of people their first job. And, the more pressure and the more regulation you put on franchisees, the harder it is for them to open those doors for other people. For example, what we saw with the minimum wages being, mandated and going up everywhere. Well, what we saw now, you go into a lot of fast food places and you don't get waited on. You've got to enter your own order. That's a job that's gone. And, the people that were pushing for those higher wages don't think through those things.
Right.
Because a franchisee, as you well know, you've got a thin margin to operate under anyway. So if we increased your cost over here, you can either increase the price of your product or service, or you got to cut cost. Those are really the only options you have.
That's true.
And
That's
we
true.
got to keep educating that
Yeah.
franchising is not the bad guys.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, and you mentioned a number of the youngsters that come into the business, especially in fast, quick service and the casual dining, that that's their first job, and
Yep.
they're able to take what they see, those skill sets, and go on and do bigger and better things in other areas as they move on. But as mentioned, if when wages go up, you got to figure out somewhere where to cut that cost, and usually labor is the first thing that you
Yep.
start taking a look at unless you can figure out how to drive those sales, you know, a little bit more. But it's a tricky thing. But legislation is key. And a lot of people don't think of that. So glad you delved into that a little bit there. So, Jenya, having known you for a while, and our podcasts are based around turning obstacles to opportunity. My recent book, autobiography of Catch as Catch Can. I like to some of the folks that we have on to talk a little bit about some of the obstacles that they want to share. I don't mind sharing that you've run into and how you turn them around to become a positive and help you overcome.
Well, I'll just be real personal. I come from Paducah, Kentucky. Part of my childhood was in a house trailer, 4 kids in a 3-bedroom house trailer with the parents. And I ran away from home at 15, George. Had my first child at 16 and graduated from high school, divorced with a kid. So,
Well,
by all means, I'm supposed to be much further down the food chain than I've been able to achieve. And I've done a lot of speaking to young women, especially through the years, and have told them, and I raised my boys this way, we all make mistakes, but how you deal with the outcome is up to you. You can wallow in it, feel sorry for yourself, and oh, poor me, or you can dust yourself off and say, I won't do that again. And you just have to keep dusting yourself off because life is a series of ups and downs and good. My first job in the bank was a secretary. When I left banking, I was a vice president of commercial lending.
wow.
And I did that by constantly raising my hand and asking for more to do. And what else could I go to school at night? What did I need to specifically learn? Because I didn't have a college degree. And what can I learn that will help me in this job? And that's what I did all the way through my career. I was never content. And maybe that's a personality flaw that it was, I think, what kept pushing me. Um, and maybe like you, I mean, for me, what my career has done has fed a part of me that maybe doubted, had a lot of self-doubt and a lot of insecurities. And I found something I was good at. And I had people that encouraged me along the way and believed in me. So that's my story in a nutshell, George.
Yeah, great story. I didn't know all of that about you, and
I didn't think so.
that's certainly a great story coming from Kentucky myself, Louisville, Kentucky. Understanding where Paducah is, of course, Kentucky in itself, has some great stories. So that's a great story. What would you say to a lot of women that are looking to get into franchising and or even the corporate structure that have some of the obstacles that you just mentioned? What advice would you give them? I don't think what you mentioned as far as a flaw is definitely not a flaw. I think it's a great personality trait to have.
Thank you. Well, and I think for women, one thing I avoided, and I would encourage anybody, don't get that chip on your shoulder, assuming that you're not going to get a chance because you're a woman and or a person of color. You can't walk around thinking you're going to be mistreated because you'll find what you're looking for. So instead, go into those opportunities with I can do this, and I'm looking forward to proving how good I can be. And constantly asking for, is that, could I cross train? Could I learn more over here? Because you show people your drive.
Mhm.
And if you're bright, it shows.
Right.
So just keep learning. Ask for take home materials to read. When I was, and I've got a young man that works for me right now that he's in marketing. So financial analysis just wasn't something in his marketing degree. But he has asked me time, and we've spent time together. He wants to learn more about financials, more about budgeting, how to understand what the numbers are telling him. That's what I admire in somebody, is that I don't know it, but I wanna learn it. And just keep doing that, and you will find somebody along the way. I had several. It's amazing. I look back and see those mentors and angels in my life that opened doors and encouraged me. So you start the path and somebody will be there to help you along the way.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. People recognize those who are really trying to grow themselves, do much better, and so forth. So, what lies next for Miss Bailey here? What is it? What are we looking at as far as your corporate or your business is concerned?
Well, I don't see myself leaving FranNet anytime soon,
Okay.
and I can't imagine doing anything else at this point in my life because this feeds me. It still feeds my heart, and it still feeds my need to contribute. And as long as that happens, I'll be here. I think for FranNet, it's weathering the storm until some of the fallout starts to happen, and I know it will. You and I both know the cream rises to the top,
Exactly.
and it's just a matter of time to the people that aren't doing it the right way. It'll shake out,
Mhm.
and we will weather that storm.
Mhm.
We've been a player in this industry for 38 years, and we're not going anywhere. We're going to keep doing the right things for the right
All
reasons.
right. Well, great leadership. Tell us a little bit about your family and how that plays a part in your everyday business.
Well, both of my sons are grown, and I have grandchildren, 5 grandchildren, and I'm actually going to be a great grandmother in June. See, that's what happened. What happens when you start young? They just keep on right behind me, so they didn't wait. Um, but yeah, my grandson and his new wife, I'm just so excited. They announced this and at Christmas, so we're very excited for them. My husband, Keith Satterfield, and he's not offended I didn't take his name. He understood business reasons. But Keith and I have our 9-year anniversary coming up this year. And
Congratulations.
I have to say, Keith has been the best cheerleader I've ever had in my life. He's very supportive, very understanding of the hours that I need to put in sometimes. And he's the first one to say, it's time for you to walk away. You need a break.
Yeah.
But I never had that before. It's the cheerleader who also looked after me. And so that is a big part of my life. And it's a part I make sure to make time for, both for Keith and for my grandkids and my grown children.
Oh, that's great. I gotta admit, I know Keith. He's one of the fine young men that I know, always very positive and very caring and so forth, and he great golfer too. He helps me out with my golf team. So, thank you for bringing him to Florida, to the area. So, but, is there anything else that you would like to share with us, about, the business, the franchise community? Really enjoyed, yeah, getting all this, expertise from you. So, anything else you would like to share?
Well, I would just say to anybody considering franchising, whether it's if you're looking to franchise your business, be sure to get some solid advice and look at it. Don't rush in and do something. And don't work with somebody who just takes your money and hands you an FDD and says you're done.
Right.
It's a lot to do. There's a lot of opportunity, but there's a lot of ways to mess up along the way without the right guidance. If you're an individual who's burned out on corporate America thinking about getting into franchising, take your time, do your due diligence, make those calls. It's a great industry, but be sure you make the best possible choice for you.
Right. You mentioned, something here that just got my attention, when you mentioned looking at franchising, you mentioned the FDD. Could you tell the audience a little bit about that?
The FDD is the franchise disclosure document. And this is required by the Federal Trade Commission for every franchisor to provide to someone that is looking at their franchise with an intent to possibly become a franchisee. So I hear horror stories of people who are talking to franchisors who won't give them the FDD. If they won't give you the FDD, you need to walk away
Walk away.
because that's required. The next thing is, that sucker is a couple of hundred pages and it can be boring reading. Read it anyway. There's stuff in there that you can learn. Has there been any litigations? If so, how prevalent? Is this a company that's constantly in lawsuits? Run for your life. If their financial statement of the parent company is not strong, you're going to write them a check for $25,000 or $30,000 or up to $60,000. Are they going to be there in 10 years to support you? Or are they operating on a shoestring? So that's what's in the FDD. That's why you need to take the time to read it. And I'm glad that disclosure is a part of our industry.
Right. You mentioned that, and I gave a presentation down in South Florida several months ago, and when I talked about the FDD to the audience, I saw the mouths drop and eyes, wide open, like they'd never heard of it before. And that is a key document to take a look at before you take the next step. Another key thing is how the potential franchisee, the person looking to get in, how they personally their makeup, how they match with that particular
Exactly.
franchise. Can you elaborate a little bit there?
Sure.
What you're
And,
talking?
like I said, that's kind of one of the things we do. And it's what's their culture and are you a fit? If it's an early stage franchise, if you're a person who needs a whole lot of structure and a lot of reinforcement and constant, contact, you're not going to get it in a young one because they're going to be running and gunning. Now, if you're that person that says, I wished I'd have owned the first KFC or the first McDonald's and I want to be a part of that, just go in with your eyes open. On the flip side, if you're that real entrepreneurial person who says, I can't wait to make all these changes and make it more, you're not going to fit into a structured, mature brand because they've been down those roads. They've tried the things that worked and didn't work, and they're going to expect you to follow their process. So that's one of the things you have to look at. Another is your budget. Don't risk everything you have. Don't put it all on the line because not everyone is successful. Be sure it's a comfort level in the investment you're going to make. If you lost it all, would you be okay? And I don't think many people want to hear that, George, but the banker in me says you got to take care of home and hearth too. You got to be sure that if this doesn't work,
Mhm.
are we okay?
Sure.
Um, It's not falling in love with a product. It's falling in love with what you'll be doing. I often pick on the frozen yogurt companies. I love frozen yogurt, dearly love frozen yogurt, but I would be a terrible owner of frozen yogurt because on Friday night, when my teenagers decided they'd rather go to the football game or the basketball game, or they have a hot date, the teenagers working for me, I'm in there scooping yogurt on Friday night, which was not my plan. So you've got to think about what your role. Are you going to be okay going into a KFC at night when there's a problem and taking care of it? Are you going to be okay, putting in those extra hours yourself sometimes? Owning a business is very different than having a job.
And you're exactly right. I find, like you just mentioned, when I talk to some prospective franchisees, I have to be kind of careful because I don't want to discourage them, but at the
Right?
same time, I want them to understand the reality of
Yeah.
having to work 7 days a week, and your buddies are off in Hawaii having vacation and so forth. I'll never forget that first year as a franchisee, having to work 24/7 and keep getting that restaurant up and running. And my buddies were calling me, and they were in Hawaii. Well, why aren't you here with the meeting that we're having and so forth? And literally almost crying, as I got through that first year. But it paid off because I wound up with the number one KFC in the nation for town size that year. It all due to dedicating myself to making it happen. So it's not easy, and not easy at
No.
all. So
I always love people, George, that say, I want a low cost business that I can make millions and not have to work real hard.
right.
And my answer is, when you find it, call me, please.
Right. And sometimes it's that statement where you tell people, or they ask you and you tell them you're in the franchise business. The first question is, how many do you have?
Mhm.
And not understanding that you can have 1, 2, or 3 good restaurants
Right?
versus 100 that 50% of them are bad, and the other 50% may be performing well, but they
Mhm.
bring it down. So that's a misconception also.
Yep.
And it,
And I always bring up, not all franchising is French fries
right.
or fried chicken. There are a lot of service-based industries that are a very good fit for people. It can be your background makes you a great manager owner of some services you would have never thought of. That's why it's important to take your time and look.
Right, right. You mentioned French fries. I think we collaborate on a book there that says not just French fries.
Yep, more than French fries.
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
So, Jania, I tell you, after listening to you, I'm going to be looking for you to write your first book. If not, if you haven't already got one out there, you'll tell your life story. Quite a great story from
Thank you.
Paducah, Kentucky, to where you are today and where you're going. I wish you all the luck in the world. I want to thank you for being on the podcast with us today and giving us a great insight. And wish you all the best success in the world.
Thank you, George. I appreciate you, and I appreciate your friendship.
Thank you. Likewise.
This has been Catch as Catch Can. Your success story is waiting to be written. What will you catch today? Go to tinsley.speaks.com for exclusive content, resources, and opportunities. Catch as Catch Can with George Tinsley Sr. is a production of Advantage Media.